Be me, Connor, 28 years old. Got a job as a logistics coordinator at a massive distribution center right out of college. Not a glamorous gig, but I was good at it. The kind of job where you see the direct results of your work every single day. Our facility was a beast, a sprawling concrete box bigger than a dozen football fields, filled with the constant hum of conveyors and the beeping of forklifts. For years, it ran like a Swiss watch. We weren't just moving boxes, we were solving a giant physical puzzle every single day. The guy who taught me most of what I know was Alaric. He was the day shift supervisor, a guy probably in his late 50s who had been working there since the place was built. Alaric was made of coffee, cynicism, and an encyclopedic knowledge of every single process, shortcut, and potential bottleneck in that building. He wasn't friendly, not in the traditional sense. He never asked about your weekend. But if you had a problem, like a trailer getting stuck at the dock or a sudden surge in orders for a specific product, he was the man you went to. He'd listen, grunt, and then give you a solution that was so simple and effective you'd feel stupid for not thinking of it yourself. He respected competence, and that was it. The culture he fostered was straightforward. Do your job well, don't cause drama, and help the guy next to you if he's in the weeds. It worked. Our efficiency numbers were always top of the region. We had a good crew. Most of the guys on the floor had been there for years. They knew the rhythm of the place. There was a kind of unspoken understanding, a professional camaraderie built on getting the job done right. We could handle anything. Holiday rushes, unexpected supply chain disruptions, system upgrades, we'd figure it out. Then, sometime late last summer, maybe August, the email came down from corporate. There was going to be a restructuring of our regional management. They were creating a new position, head of operations. This person would be our direct boss, overseeing me, Alaric, and a few other department leads like Hannah from customer service. A week later, we had an all-hands meeting in the main loading bay. They rolled in a big TV on a cart. The regional director, a guy we saw maybe once a year, appeared on the screen from his polished office 1,000 miles away. He gave the standard corporate speech about moving into the future and leveraging new talent. Then he introduced our new boss, London. She walked out from the small office area to stand in front of the assembled crew. The first thing I noticed was that she was completely out of place. She was wearing an expensive-looking business suit and heels that were totally impractical for a concrete warehouse floor. She looked like she was there to foreclose on the building, not run it. She had this smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The regional director on the screen finished his spiel, and London stepped up to the microphone. Her voice was sharp, confident. She started talking, and the air just went out of the room. It was a fire hose of the worst corporate buzzwords you've ever heard. She talked about recontextualizing our operational paradigms. She wanted to foster a culture of psychological safety and disrupt the status quo. I glanced over at Alaric. He was just staring at her, completely expressionless, like a biologist observing a strange new insect. The forklift drivers in the back were already starting to whisper among themselves. She said her background was in human resources, with a focus on workplace dynamics and progressive management strategies. Not a single word about logistics, not a mention of supply chains, inventory management, or shipping schedules. Her whole speech was about feelings, not freight. She ended by saying her first priority was to make the warehouse a more inclusive and equitable environment. The meeting ended, and the whole crew just kind of dispersed quietly, like after a funeral. Later that day, I was in the break room grabbing a coffee, and Alaric was there. He just looked at me and shook his head slowly. The only thing he said was, "This is going to be interesting." The first couple of weeks were just weird. London spent most of her time in her office with the door closed. When she did walk the floor, she had a notepad and would just watch us, scribbling things down. It felt less like she was trying to learn the operation and more like she was gathering evidence for a trial. Then the improvements started. First, she had all the safety posters, which were clear and direct, replaced with new ones. The new posters were pastel-colored and had vague, inspirational quotes about teamwork and positivity. They were harder to read and contained less actual safety information. Then came the mandatory weekly meetings, an hour every Wednesday morning where the entire leadership team had to sit in the conference room. She'd put up a PowerPoint presentation about topics like unconscious bias in the workplace or deconstructing traditional power structures. It had nothing to do with our jobs. It was an hour taken directly from our most productive time of the day, and it threw the morning's shipping schedule into chaos every single time. Alaric and I tried to explain this to her. He pointed out that pulling the supervisors off the floor during the morning rush was causing a backlog at the docks. I showed her the data on our efficiency numbers, which had taken a noticeable dip on Wednesdays. She just listened with that same tight smile. She told us that building a better culture was more important than a few percentage points on a spreadsheet. She suggested that our resistance to the meetings was a sign that we were uncomfortable with change. That was when I first realized you couldn't reason with her. Data, logic, experience, none of it mattered. Her ideology was a shield against reality. The guys on the floor started to get demoralized. They were good at their jobs and took pride in their work. Now they were being treated like they were part of a problem that needed to be fixed. The small things kept piling up. She got rid of the old coffee machine that Alaric had personally maintained for a decade and replaced it with some complicated pod machine that was always broken. She rearranged the break room furniture, according to some feng shui article she read, making it awkward and sterile. It felt like she was systematically erasing every piece of the old culture. Hannah, who ran the customer service department, initially thought London was great. She was excited about the new energy she was bringing. They'd have lunch together sometimes. Hannah's job was to talk to clients, so she was a bit removed from the physical operations on the floor. She didn't see the problems these changes were causing. Not yet, anyway. The real breaking point came about a month into her tenure. It was the day she decided to revolutionize our entire inventory storage system. For 20 years, our warehouse had used a standard industry-wide ABC analysis system. It's simple logic. A items, the 20% of products that make up 80% of our orders, are stored closest to the shipping docks for fast access. B items, the next level of popularity, are in the middle. C items, the slow movers, are in the back. This minimizes travel time for the forklifts and pickers. It's the foundation of an efficient warehouse. London called a meeting with me and Alaric. She announced that the ABC system was an outdated and non-inclusive method. She claimed it created a hierarchy among the products. I am not kidding. Her brilliant new idea was to reorganize the entire warehouse, alphabetically. Every product, from a tiny screw to a giant piece of furniture, would be stored based on the first letter of its name. I thought it was a joke at first. I honestly waited for the punchline. There was no punchline. I tried to explain, as calmly and professionally as I could, why this was a terrible idea. I pulled up the inventory management software on my tablet. I showed her the numbers. London, look. The top-selling product right now is the Apex office chair. Under the new system, it would be stored right next to the aquarium gravel, which we sell maybe 3 bags of a month. That's fine. But our second best seller is the Zenith standing desk. That would be stored all the way at the other end of the building, in the Zadid section. A picker would have to drive his forklift the entire length of the warehouse and back for almost every single popular order. I showed her the simulation. This change won't just slow us down. It will increase our order fulfillment time by, at a minimum, 40%. It will create traffic jams in the aisles. It's logistically unworkable. Alaric, in his blunt way, chimed in. He told her they tried something similar once, years ago, as an experiment in a small section of the warehouse. It was such a failure that they abandoned it after 2 days. He was just stating a fact based on experience. London's face changed. That polite corporate mask fell away for a second. She looked at us, 2 men with decades of combined experience in this field, and her eyes narrowed. She didn't hear our concerns. She heard a challenge to her authority. She stood up. Her voice was cold. I understand that it can be difficult to embrace new ideas, especially when you are so attached to the old ways of doing things. Then she looked directly at me. I really don't need my own operational strategy explained back to me. It's condescending. She turned to Alaric. And I don't need anecdotes about what some guys tried to do 10 years ago. This is a different era. She took a deep breath and delivered the final blow. This is a classic example of men feeling the need to assert their dominance by over-explaining things to a female superior. It's a form of toxic masculinity, and it will not be tolerated in my department. We were stunned into silence. We weren't being toxic. We were trying to prevent a multi-million-dollar mistake. We were trying to help her, and by extension, the company. She interpreted our expertise as an insult. The meeting was over. She told us to begin drafting a plan to implement the alphabetical system immediately. The next morning, the email landed in everyone's inbox. Subject: a new policy on workplace communication. It was an official, department-wide directive. It stated that to combat unconscious bias and create a more equitable dialogue, a new rule was in effect immediately. Male employees were no longer permitted to offer unsolicited advice, solutions, or alternative viewpoints to female colleagues. All suggestions or concerns about projects managed by female colleagues had to be submitted through a new online suggestion and feedback portal. The form on the portal had about 30 fields you had to fill out. Submissions would then be reviewed by management at their discretion and in a timely manner. It was a gag order disguised as corporate policy. She had banned mansplaining. What she had actually done was ban competence. She had outlawed experience. The mood on the floor that day was grim. The guys were angry, but they also felt defeated. How do you fight something like that? If you object, you're just proving her point that you're toxic. It was a checkmate. That evening I saw Alaric out in the parking lot, leaning against his old pickup truck. I walked over. For a few minutes, we just stood there in silence, watching the last of the trucks pull away from the docks. Finally, he pushed himself off the truck. He looked at me, and there was no anger in his eyes, just a calm, cold clarity. "You know what we do now, Connor?" he asked. I shook my head. "We do exactly what she says," he continued. "To the letter. Every single instruction, every single policy. We follow it perfectly. She wants the warehouse organized alphabetically. We will make it the most perfectly organized alphabetical warehouse in the country. She wants feedback through a form. Then we will document every single potential problem, every single risk, and every single inefficiency we see. We will fill out that form, in triplicate if we have to. We will send the emails. We will create a paper trail so long and so detailed that it'll reach the moon." He took a drag from a cigarette he'd just lit. "No more initiative, no more clever solutions, no more saving the day. We are no longer problem solvers. We are box checkers. We will do our assigned tasks, and nothing more." He looked me straight in the eye. "She wants to be the boss? Fine. Let her be the boss. Let her own every single decision she makes." It wasn't a plan for sabotage. It was a plan for perfect, absolute, malicious compliance. A quiet pact was made. The next day, the change was immediate. The collaborative energy of the place vanished overnight. If a guy saw a pallet stacked incorrectly, he wouldn't just fix it. He'd take a picture, document it, and report it to his direct supervisor to await instruction. If a conveyor belt started making a weird noise, no one would just grab a wrench and tighten it. They'd log it in the maintenance system and wait for a work order to be approved by London. It was a silent protest, executed with chilling precision. And so, we began the great idiotic task of reorganizing the entire warehouse. It was a logistical nightmare. We had to essentially shut down sections of the facility for days at a time, pulling down every single pallet and moving it to its new, illogical home. Our productivity cratered. Orders were delayed. During one of London's Wednesday meetings, she brought up the declining numbers. She asked why the reorganization was taking so long. Alaric, with a perfectly straight face, explained it. He described the process in painstaking detail, the safety protocols we had to follow, the man-hours required for each aisle, the limitations of the forklift fleet. He wasn't complaining. He was just reporting the facts, exactly as a subordinate should. I chimed in, noting that we had submitted several suggestions via the portal on how to potentially streamline the process, but we hadn't received a response yet. London got defensive. She said she was inundated with feedback and was processing it. She told us to just stick to the plan. So, we did. Hannah started getting frantic calls from clients. "Where is our shipment? It's 3 days late." She would come to me, looking stressed. "Connor, what's going on? Can't you guys do something to speed things up?" I'd just give her an apologetic look. "Hannah, we're following the new operational plan. I can't authorize any deviations. You'll have to speak with London." I could see the frustration in her eyes. She was starting to realize that London's new energy was the energy of a Category 5 hurricane. This slow-motion disaster continued for weeks, and all the while, the busiest time of the year was approaching, like a storm cloud on the horizon. Black Friday. The preparation for the holiday season usually started in early October. In a normal year, Alaric and I would have been in planning meetings for weeks already, stress testing the systems, coordinating with shipping carriers, and bringing on seasonal staff. It was a massive undertaking, a carefully choreographed dance to handle a 300% increase in order volume. This year, there was none of that. London held a single Black Friday kickoff meeting. She presented a PowerPoint deck she had clearly made herself. It was full of clip art and inspirational quotes. Her grand strategy for handling the busiest retail day of the year was to empower the team to embrace the challenge. She talked about leveraging our new streamlined alphabetical system for unprecedented efficiency. She was actually proud of it. She thought the chaos she had created was an improvement. At the end of the presentation, she asked if there were any questions. The room was silent. No one dared to speak up. What was the point? After the meeting, I went back to my desk and did exactly what Alaric had told me to do. I opened the suggestion and feedback portal. I began to write. I wrote a detailed multi-page analysis of her plan. I used cold, hard data from previous years. I outlined, with charts and projections, exactly why the alphabetical system would fail under the expected load. I predicted a catastrophic failure in the picking and packing process by 10 a.m. on Black Friday. I predicted a complete gridlock at the shipping docks by noon. I estimated that we would be lucky to fulfill 20% of the day's orders. It wasn't emotional, it was a technical document, a risk assessment. I ended it by stating, "In accordance with operational policy, my team will execute your plan as directed. This document is submitted for informational purposes only." I hit send. I got an automated reply. "Thank you for your feedback. Your submission has been received and will be reviewed in due course." I never got a real response. Seeing the writing on the wall, I started to think about my own future. I wasn't going to go down with this ship. I'd been loyal to this company for years, but my loyalty was to the job, to the work, to the guys on the floor. It wasn't to a manager who actively despised my competence. So, I polished up my resume. I started quietly looking at job postings. I saw an opening for a logistics manager at a rival company, a slightly smaller but rapidly growing firm in the same city. It was a step up, more responsibility, better pay. On a whim, I applied. I didn't expect to hear back, but I got a call 2 days later. They wanted to interview me. The interview was at their headquarters, a clean, modern building that felt professional and efficient. The man who interviewed me was the director of national distribution. He was in his 50s, a no-nonsense guy with a firm handshake who looked you straight in the eye. He didn't ask me about my feelings or my thoughts on workplace culture. He put a complex logistics problem on the whiteboard and asked me how I would solve it. He asked me about managing teams during a crisis. He asked about my experience with different inventory software and carrier negotiations. For an hour, we just talked shop. It felt amazing. It felt like being seen, like my skills actually mattered. At the end, he leaned back in his chair and just said, "You know your stuff, Connor. I'm impressed." A week later, they sent me an offer. It was a significant salary increase, a better title, and a signing bonus. I accepted on the spot. I gave them a start date for the first Monday in December. This meant my last day at my current job would be Black Friday itself. The irony was not lost on me. I didn't tell anyone at work, not even Alaric. I just came in every day, did my job exactly as instructed, and documented everything. The atmosphere in the warehouse in the week leading up to Black Friday was surreal. It was like the eerie calm before a hurricane. Everyone knew what was coming. The seasonal temps we hired were wandering around confused, unable to find anything in the bizarre new layout. The experienced guys were just shaking their heads, doing their work with a quiet, grim determination. London, however, was in her element. She was walking around with a clipboard, talking about the exciting energy in the building. She was completely oblivious. She had built this house of cards and genuinely believed it was a fortress. The day before Thanksgiving, she sent out a cheerful email to the whole department. "Team, get some rest. Tomorrow we make history. Let's show everyone what a motivated and forward-thinking team can do." Alaric forwarded the email to me with a single comment. "LOL. Black Friday." I got to work at 4 a.m. The building was already buzzing. The first wave of online orders had been pouring in since midnight. For the first hour, things were deceptively calm. The system was handling the initial trickle, By 6 a.m., the trickle had become a flood, and the cracks started to show. The pickers, the guys who drive the forklifts and retrieve the items, were reporting massive delays. An order that should have taken 10 minutes to pick was now taking 45. They were driving from A to W to C to T for a single 4-item order, crossing the entire warehouse over and over. By 8 a.m., the packing stations were starved for products. Dozens of workers were standing around, waiting for carts of items that weren't arriving. By 9 a.m., exactly as I had predicted, chaos began to set in. The main aisles were clogged with forklifts, creating a massive traffic jam. I saw 2 of them nearly collide. London was in her office looking at spreadsheets on her computer. She seemed to think everything was fine, because the numbers on her screen weren't reflecting the physical reality on the floor yet. Around 9:30 a.m., Hannah from customer service came running out of her office. Her face was pale. "The order tracking system is broken," she yelled. "Customers are getting notifications that their items have shipped, but the boxes are still sitting on the packing line." That was the first domino. The software couldn't handle the illogical workflow and was marking orders as complete long before they were. By 10 a.m., the whole system was in a death spiral. The shipping docks were a disaster. Trucks were lined up, ready to be loaded. But there were hardly any completed packages to give them. London finally came out of her office. She saw the gridlock, the idle workers, the mountains of unprocessed orders. The look on her face was one of utter disbelief. She couldn't process that her perfect plan had failed. She started walking the floor, barking orders. "You! Why are you just standing there? Go faster! Why is this aisle blocked? Clear this aisle." Her commands were useless because she didn't understand the root of the problem. She was like a person trying to fix a broken engine by screaming at the steering wheel. The guys just ignored her. They were trying their best to work within the broken system she had created. By 11 a.m., we had officially lost control. The regional director was calling London's phone non-stop. We could hear it ringing from across the floor. She wasn't answering. She was running around, on the verge of tears, trying to manually direct forklift traffic. It was a pathetic sight. At 11:30 a.m., the regional director patched into the warehouse-wide intercom system. His voice boomed through the building, dripping with fury. "London, get to the main conference room. Now. Connor, Alaric, you too." We walked into the conference room. London was already there, looking completely broken. Hannah was there too, looking terrified. The director's face was on the big screen. He looked like he was about to have a stroke. "What is happening at my facility?" he roared. "I have our biggest retail partners on the phone screaming at me. Our fulfillment rate is at 17%. 17%. Explain yourselves." London started to speak, her voice trembling. She launched into a rambling, incoherent defense. She blamed the old-fashioned attitudes of the staff. She blamed their resistance to change. Then she pointed a shaking finger at me and Alaric. "It's them! It's sabotage! They were against me from day one. This is a coordinated attack. It's because I'm a woman in a position of power. It's toxic masculinity." The director was just staring, his jaw tight. He looked at me. "Connor, what's your take on this?" I stayed calm. I stood up and placed my company laptop on the conference table, turning it to face the camera. I opened a file. "Sir," I said, my voice steady, "this is a copy of the risk assessment I submitted to London 5 weeks ago, detailing precisely the catastrophic failure we are currently experiencing. It projected a fulfillment rate of under 20%. I believe my exact words were that the plan was logistically unworkable." I opened another folder. And this is a collection of 57 separate emails and portal submissions from me, Alaric, and other supervisors, documenting every single risk, inefficiency, and safety concern we identified over the past 2 months as we were instructed to implement the new system. We have acknowledgments for every single one. We were repeatedly told to proceed as planned. I looked from the screen to London. There was no sabotage. There was only compliance. We followed every order, every policy, to the letter. The silence in the room was absolute. London's face had gone from red to ghost white. Hannah was staring at me, her mouth slightly open, finally understanding. The director on the screen just looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at London with a look of pure contempt. I took a deep breath. It was time for the finale. "With that being said," I continued, I'm afraid I can't be of any further assistance in this matter. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my company ID and access card. I placed them gently on the table. Today is my last day. I've accepted a management position with another company. My resignation is effective immediately. I looked around the room one last time. I wish you all the best of luck solving this. And then I turned, walked out of the conference room, and didn't look back. I walked through the chaotic warehouse, a place that had been my professional home for years. I walked past Alaric's office. He was sitting at his desk. He saw me, and for the first time in the years I'd known him, he smiled. A real, genuine smile. He gave me a slow, deliberate nod. I walked out the main entrance into the cold November air and got in my car. As I drove out of the parking lot, I didn't feel angry or sad. I just felt free. The epilogue to this story is pretty satisfying. My old company was in the news for weeks. They had to publicly apologize for the shipping disaster, and their stock took a major hit. London was fired that same afternoon, of course, escorted out of the building by security. I heard they had to hire a hugely expensive team of outside consultants to come in and fix the mess, which basically just involved changing everything back to the way it was before. A few weeks after I started my new job, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Alaric. The text said, "The new bosses begged me to stay on and help clean up. I told them I would, as an independent contractor. My hourly rate is now roughly what I used to make in a week. Thanks for the show, kid. Drinks are on me. My new job is great. I work with professionals. My expertise is valued. I'm respected. Sometimes, when I'm sitting in my new, quiet office, I think back on that whole fiasco. It's a perfect example of what happens when ideology is valued more than competence. She had all the power in the world, but she didn't have the experience or the wisdom to use it. We tried to warn her. We tried to help. She didn't want help. She wanted obedience. In the end, she got it, and it destroyed her.